Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. How much say should a sponsor have in determining who gets to play in a bowl game? After all, for a lot of these bowl games, the sponsors are the only reason why they exist. Should the sponsor get to overrule a decision made by the selection committee and say, nope, we want a different team to play in this game instead because it would be better for our business? Well, the game you're watching right now is the 1995 CarQuest Bowl between South Carolina and West Virginia. There have been 31 editions of this bowl game played under a variety of names, from the Blockbuster Bowl to the MicronPC.com Bowl to its current name, the Cheez-It Bowl. Not to be confused with the Cheez-It Bowl that took place in Arizona that has no relation to the Cheez-It Bowl in Florida. I know, super confusing. However, of all the 31 editions of this game, this one had, without a doubt, the strangest controversy in terms of the selection. Because to answer the question I presented at the top of the video, let's just say that for this bowl game, CarQuest had a heavy say into who got to play in the game, to the point where a massive delay and massive controversy ensued that nearly 3 decades later still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In 1995, West Virginia was invited to play in the CarQuest Bowl under the strangest of circumstances. And this is the story behind the bizarre selection controversy. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and just how strange it was, we need some context to understand how West Virginia's season was going, as well as what happened in the past that led CarQuest to try this absolutely insane stunt. Entering the 1994 season, there were some expectations for the Mountaineers. People thought they'd be good, but no one knew how good they'd be. On one hand, they were coming off of one of their best seasons in program history, where in 1993, they went 11-1, were undefeated in regular season play, and had a number 3 ranking going into the Sugar Bowl, where they eventually lost to Florida. On the other hand, they lost a ton of their top offensive talent that guided them in 1993, losing quarterback Jake Kelchner and their top 3 receivers. The Mountaineers had a top 25 ranking in the AP preseason poll, but a lot of people were skeptical of whether or not they'd truly be able to live up to what they did in 1993 and build off of it, or whether they would take a step backward in 1994. As for what happened in 1994, well, it was a bizarre season. It really was a tale of 2 seasons. On one hand, the season got off to an atrocious start, where they went 1-4, with the lone win being a home game against Ball State by just 2 points. Among the losses included a road loss to Rutgers, and you can learn more about that Rutgers team by clicking the card in the upper right corner, a 34-6 road loss to Virginia Tech, and a 31-0 loss at Giants Stadium to Nebraska. Forget living up to what they did in 1993. There was now legitimate concern at this point as to whether or not they would even be eligible to play in a bowl game. However, over the second half of the season, they were able to right the ship and completely turn things around. They won 6 of their final 7 games, with a lone loss coming against the top 10 ranked Miami team, and they even beat 2 ranked opponents to end the regular season, defeating number 17 ranked Boston College and shutting out number 22 ranked Syracuse. By the time the season ended, the Mountaineers were riding high on a 4-game winning streak, and out of nowhere, in what can only be described as a remarkable turnaround, had worked their way into the bowl picture. The bad news for West Virginia was that despite this turnaround, they only had 7 wins, which was tied with Syracuse and Boston College for the 3rd highest total in the Big East. And this was in a conference at the time where they only had 4 bowl tie-ins, with the champion going to the Orange Bowl, the second choice going to the Gator Bowl, the third choice going to the CarQuest Bowl, and the fourth choice going to the Aloha Bowl. This meant that of the 3 teams to have 7 wins, one of them was going to be on the outside looking in from the bowl picture, as there were just 4 spots for 5 teams. The good news for West Virginia was that I think just about everyone thought that there was not a chance in the world that they would be left out, and everyone thought that they would be the 3rd choice in the Big East. In their last 2 games, the Mountaineers defeated Syracuse and Boston College, so they had the head-to-head over everyone. They had 2 ranked wins, which was the same as Boston College and was 1 more than Syracuse. They were riding high in a 4-game winning streak and were peaking at the right time, compared to Boston College, who had dropped their last 2 games, and Syracuse, who had dropped 3 of their last 4 games. And they had an exciting offense that people wanted to watch, as West Virginia scored 47 or more points in 3 of their final 6 games. Syracuse and Boston College over the course of the entire season did it just once combined. West Virginia had the best resume. For all intents and purposes, this was a clear-cut decision. Everyone knew that West Virginia was going to be the choice, and that in a just world, there was no way that the Mountaineers would not be going bowling down in Miami. And fortunately for the selection committee at the CarQuest Bowl, they felt the same way. They needed an opponent to take on South Carolina, and there was no way that they could pass up the Mountaineers considering how they were playing and how they owned every tiebreaker over the other two options. The selection on the committee was unanimous, with Brian Flajole, the executive director of the CarQuest Bowl, saying the thing we kept coming back to was, it's the right thing to take West Virginia. There were legitimate arguments for the other two schools, but this was one no one could argue against. When you've got the chance, you've got to reward the team that won it on the field. Makes complete sense to me. Reward the team with the head-to-head and the best resume. So this should be a complete non-story, right? West Virginia, after a remarkable turnaround to their season, earned the right to play South Carolina in the CarQuest Bowl and rightfully got the invitation over Syracuse and Boston College. Well, not so fast, my friend, because that's where CarQuest comes into the equation, and said, yeah, we don't like this one bit. And they tried to block West Virginia from playing in their own bowl game. In CarQuest's eyes, they did not think that having West Virginia play in this bowl game was a good idea, and there were two reasons for this. Number one, they were concerned as to how West Virginia fans would travel, and whether the game would be a success from an attendance standpoint. CarQuest was noticing a worrying trend that began ever since the Bowl's inaugural game in 1990, and that was the fact that every single year, the game's attendance decreased. For the first game between number 6 ranked Florida State and number 7 ranked Penn State, over 74,000 people filled up Joe Robbie Stadium. The following season, that number between Alabama and Colorado dropped to 46,000, then 45,000 the following season between Stanford and Penn State, and then an abysmal 38,000 for the most recent edition between Boston College and Virginia. 4 editions of the game, and there was a downward trend. CarQuest was spending all this money on the game, and they were not liking their return on investment from an attendance perspective, because after such a promising start for the initial game when it was known as the Blockbuster Bowl, the game was now being played in half-empty stadiums. As for how West Virginia ties into this equation, they only sold 25,000 tickets for the Sugar Bowl the year before. And that was a game where, if the right chips fell into place, they could have won the national title, or at least a share of it. There was skepticism that they would be able to sell a ton of tickets to the CarQuest Bowl, a game that doesn't exactly have a whole lot of meaning, a game that is not a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity like the Sugar Bowl is for some fan bases, and a game that a ton of Mountaineers fans never thought that they'd play in, as a lot of Mountaineers fans probably booked vacations for December and January, thinking after their 1-4 start that there was no way that they would ever even be playing in a bowl game. And number 2, they were concerned about how well the game would do from a television perspective. With Boston College, you get the coveted Boston television market, which is the 9th best TV market in the country. With Syracuse, you get the Syracuse television market, which is inside the top 100 in TV markets across the country. West Virginia, on the other hand, their TV market, of the 210 markets in the country, ranks 169th, and is roughly half the size of Topeka, Kansas. That's how small their market is. I don't think CarQuest had any doubts about whether or not West Virginia deserved to play in the game from an on-the-field standpoint, but they were worried from an off-the-field standpoint about how many eyeballs would be watching, because TV ratings are a big deal. And if you don't believe me about TV ratings mattering and how a bowl game operates, ask the Sun Bowl in 1988 how that worked out for them. You can learn more about that ratings disaster by clicking the card in the upper right corner. In other words, CarQuest was pulling the plug on West Virginia being in the game, as even though the entire selection committee unanimously approved their participation in this game, CarQuest wasn't ready to give them the spot just yet. I should also note that CarQuest's headquarters were in New York, so they might have had just a teeny tiny bit of bias in wanting a New York school to play in the game instead of West Virginia. However, nobody at CarQuest commented on the report, with the executive director of the bowl presumably banging his head against the wall as to why this wasn't a done deal yet because of a sponsor's interference, said that bowls have to look at television and fan support to figure out who should play in the game. None of this seemed fair to West Virginia at all, as they were about to be left out of the bowl that they thought they were playing in purely for something off the field that was completely out of their control. However, this is where things, if they weren't stupid already, got really stupid. Because CarQuest put in an insurance policy. CarQuest said, "You guys want West Virginia in the bowl game that badly? Sure. They just have to assure us if they can sell 24,000 tickets." What did West Virginia say to that? "No problem. We can sell 24,000 tickets." And CarQuest said, "Okay, you can play the game then." That was it. I'm sorry, what? You were so dead set on keeping West Virginia out of the bowl that you put in this policy, and then with a simple yes, decided to let them in? I have no idea what the heck CarQuest's stance was here. You'll see what I mean by that if the alarm bells and sirens aren't ringing already. Number one, no one, not a single soul, thought that West Virginia was going to sell 24,000 tickets to this game. They could barely sell that amount to the freaking Sugar Bowl the year before. What makes you think they're going to sell that for the CarQuest Bowl in a game that does not have national championship implications? Not even Ted Lawson, the chief executive officer for National Travel Inc. up in Charleston, West Virginia, thought that the Mountaineers could do it. Even he said that West Virginia had no shot at this. As he said, "I think they're going to be a little pressed to sell that many, even though they have a very good destination, and Mountaineers fans are good fans. I think the team rallied, and the fans also rallied around the team. But that number might be pushing it a little." Gee, you think? That's not just pushing it a little, that's pushing it a mile. That's like asking a fan base who couldn't sell out a playoff game to sell out a preseason game. It's not going to happen, especially when you consider the fact that the year before, Boston College only used 8,000 tickets and Virginia used 6,000 tickets. How did we go from 6,000 and 8,000 to 24,000? Come on. Now you might be asking this valid question. If no one, not even West Virginia, thought they could realistically sell 24,000 tickets to this game, then why did they accept the offer? Keeping in mind that no such agreement was made for South Carolina. And this is where it gets stupider. Because West Virginia had to pay $35 each for the 24,000 tickets that went unsold. The bowl game pays out $1 million to each team no matter what. Now let's do some math here. Let's assume that not a single person from West Virginia buys a ticket to this game. Obviously, that's not going to happen, as you could put the game in the middle of nowhere in Alaska and you would still get some diehard West Virginia fans to come. Plus, as much as I ragged on this game, it's New Year's in Miami. That's enticing for a lot of people. But let's assume that no one buys a ticket. Take the 24,000 tickets and multiply it by $35, and that comes out to $840,000. Subtract that number from $1 million, and you get a net profit of $160,000. That means that, even if not a single West Virginia fan buys a ticket, that you're not only making $160,000, but you're getting national television exposure on CBS. Of course I'd do it! That's free money! That's literally free money! West Virginia would be idiots to not accept that deal. CarQuest wanted to keep West Virginia out of their bowl game so badly that they drafted up a condition that they knew West Virginia couldn't hit, but didn't have to show any factual evidence for, and drafted an insurance policy that might have been the worst policy ever because CarQuest would still come out in the red. Explain how any of this makes sense. It's like me telling a kid who loves sugar that there's 5 cookies in the cookie jar. You get a $20 allowance no matter what. You have to pinky promise me that you're not going to eat the cookie, and for each cookie that you take, I'm taking $1 away from your allowance. Take a wild guess as to what the kid is going to do, knowing that you created a policy that allows him to have his cookie and still make a good amount of money. Good job, CarQuest. The game itself was a really good game, and was one of the better versions of the CarQuest Bowl to take place. South Carolina won the game 24-21, as the game was incredibly evenly matched, with West Virginia getting 390 yards of total offense compared to 375 for the Gamecocks. The bowl organizers and CarQuest, even despite their best intentions to sabotage the game, got what they wanted in a good game. But the fact that it even came to that in the first place was ridiculous. So what's the moral of the story? To all the bowl sponsors watching this video, if you're going to sponsor a bowl game and you really want an input as to what team will play in your game, don't do what CarQuest did. Just don't. In fact, as a good piece of advice, ask yourself what CarQuest would do. And then do literally the exact opposite. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.